In a previous episode on this channel, we explored all of the different species or races, whatever you want to call them, that belong to the council of the massive space station known as the Citadel. From the Turians to the Asari, we got to see what they were like before they gained spaceflight technology, as well as their traditions they hold as sacred even to this date. However, venturing outside of the Citadel, we'd also go on to discover many other species that keep to themselves and do not take a part in the Milky Way's political sphere. One in particular is a nomadic species who keep to themselves most of the time, isolating themselves from any other species due to fears of war with them or due to many health reasons. But discovering this group known as the Quarians, we will go on to discover that life for them wasn't easy at all, and despite having a ton of individuals trained in combat and being extremely advanced in technology, they are endlessly fearful of losing everything they pride themselves on and live a life that focuses always on looking after their own and traveling around in their own part of space looking for somewhere to set up their society. So who are the Quarians really? Why are they the way they are? Why do they wear extremely protective suits? And what has their overall history been? Well, in today's episode, we will be exploring this nomadic species along with their traditions, their physiology, politics, and their brutal war with the synthetics known as the Geth and how it all started. This is the story of the nomadic species from the Milky Way galaxy. This is the story behind the species known as the Quarians from Mass Effect. The Quarian story starts on their original homeworld known as Rannoch, an arid planet orbiting an older star in the Tikkun system. Unfortunately, it is unknown when the Quarians first came about and when they started being smart and aware of everything around them, but considering the Asari are known as the oldest current species in the Milky Way galaxy, it would most likely be that the Quarians came about not long after them. What is known though is that the Quarians were always extremely skilled with technology and have been working with it for generations, not only building technology for their homeworld, but taking to spaceflight extremely quickly. Working extremely hard on advancing their species into their own future, the Quarians decided they could maximize their workload by creating their own form of worker, one that was completely mechanical and could do all of the labor duties that they didn't necessarily want to do on a regular basis. Here in the year of 1850 CE, the Quarians went on to create their mechanical workers that they would name as the Geth. Not only would these Geth be used as laborers and working on day-to-day tasks, the Quarians would also build them as tools of war, to make sure that if they were to ever start a war with anyone or be attacked, they could just send in their endless robots and their population would be saved from being on the front lines themselves. Knowing full well that this was a dangerous project, the Quarians would make sure that these Geth would only be virtual intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, mainly because of the fact that AI was far more deadly if it became self-aware, but also because at this point in time the Quarians were aware of the Citadel and its council, and there's extremely strong law that all AIs were to be banned. If the Quarians made the Geth with AI, then the Citadel would come down hard on them, and ultimately it would not be worth it. But despite having a good worker that was doing everything they wanted, the Quarians kept working on them, developing their appearances and making it so the Geth were able to do more complex tasks, forming what was an incredibly complex and sophisticated neural network. But this was ultimately their biggest mistake. With the Geth getting smarter and smarter by the day and their programming allowed them to do more and more complex things, they eventually broke free from their commands and started questioning everything around them, making them sentient to some extent. This all became evident one day when one Geth unit started asking its overseer multiple questions about its own existence and what it was made to do. It was noted, however, that this wasn't the first time a unit had questioned its soul and purpose before. However, this moment was the first time a unit had asked it, and the Quarians had started to fear it, and why it was asking these specific things. Hearing multiple stories of Geth units questioning their existence, the Quarian government stepped in immediately and ordered not a new programming feature or open communication with the Geth, but instead a full-on termination of all of the Geth, hoping that this would be the end of these questions and it would stop what was looking like a revolution that was forming within the Geth society. Despite the government stating this was the best way to control the Geth, many within the Quarian society society objected to their termination, mainly because they did not want to give up their Geth servants. But the government wasn't going to listen to these traitorous Quarians who sympathized with the Geth and went even further, ordering a martial law all over Rannoch, which suddenly made it clear to all who were protective of the Geth that they were outnumbered and they were to be either detained or killed by their own government, a martial law that still exists to this very date. The Geth, however, did not forget that not all of the Quarians wanted them to die, and whilst the Quarians themselves forgot about all those who stood up against their government, the Geth would remember the sacrifices they made. But with these sympathizers now out of the picture, it was time to act upon this termination order. But it was easier said than done, as the Quarians quickly found out. Because of how complex and sophisticated the Geth's neural network was, they were quickly able to set up defenses on Rannoch and were able to successfully defend themselves from the oncoming Quarian troops sent to take them out, always being 2 steps ahead of the aggressors. And because of how successful these defenses were, the whole of Rannoch would be plunged into a planet-side war as the Quarians desperately tried everything to take them out for good, not leaving any of the Geth left. This planet-side war was a total disaster for the Quarians. Billions of them died due to how powerful the Geth were, and it didn't take long before the government realized they needed to go into Plan B and evacuate their home planet completely, knowing that the Geth had won and taken too much land for themselves. The other reason for this complete abandonment of their planet was that the government knew if they were to get a certain distance away from their view, the Geth would not be able to process who they were and would be unable to recognize them as a threat and would therefore cease their pursuit. It was the only option at this point, and with that, they fled Rannoch and the Geth attacks. Upon leaving their home planets, the Quarians sought the aid of the Citadel Council to help get more numbers to come fight with them and take on the whole of the Geth forces and reclaim their planet once again. However, the Citadel Council refused to help them in their war, most likely because they saw it as the Quarians who started this whole problem in the first place, and with aid being unavailable, the Quarians fled out into the rest of the system with the remaining ships left in their fleet. On top of that, the Council also went to strip the Quarians of their embassy in the Citadel as punishment for their carelessness, and on top of that, a treaty was agreed upon forbidding any more attacks on the Geth to make sure no one provoked them anymore. Now with this all put in place, the Quarians' only option was to just drift through the systems in their reasonably sized fleet, searching for resources to sustain what they named their migrant fleet, and desperate to now find a new homeworld that they could colonize. Although with that said, pretty much all of the Quarians at this point were hopeful that one day they would return to their home planet of Rannoch and secure it for themselves once again, and with it, rid the Geth's existence once and for all. But the biggest issue with the Quarians finding a new home came with their own physiology. Since time began, the Quarians had always been born with an extremely weak immune system, simply because Rannoch didn't have many, if any, pathogenic microbes within the biosphere. This matched with the fact that there were very few viruses and other microbes within the atmosphere meant that they could never build up enough of immunity to just travel out without worry. However, the ones they did have on their planet allowed them to have a somewhat symbiotic relationship with their environment. Now living amongst their own kind of their migrant fleet ships, this immune system would just get worse day by day due to the fact that they were never exposed to any viruses or microbes out there. On a ship, they were virtually none, as the environment was completely sterile, leaving them extremely vulnerable to any other planet's atmospheres or even any other species they come into contact with. That matched with constant generations being born with the limited immune system of their parents meant it was getting more and more dangerous for them as a space traveling species to really do anything. Because of this new problem for the Quarians, ever since they left their perfect environment, the scientists would create and administer various vaccinations and immunizations to the populace to help ward off any diseases and deadly viruses. But this is an extra measure that some do if they are extremely paranoid about getting ill. The most common thing for the Quarians to do is for them to wear their extremely safe environment suits, which make sure nothing can get in, as well as working as a protective armor for if they are in a firefight with anyone, which is most likely the Geth units. This is the preferred choice with all Quarians, and it is one of the rarest sights to see a Quarian without their protective suit. If a Quarian is to take off their suit, they would have to take a ton of antibiotics, immunoboosters, herbal supplements, and many other healing things to make sure they stay well in a foreign environment. However, this doesn't mean these individuals won't get ill, it just means they limit the risks. Even when it comes to romances and reproduction, this can lead to massive issues, as it will more often than not lead to infections and other bodily problems. If they were to get lucky and look to have a little baby Quarian, this individual would be taken to clean rooms within their ships, where they would give birth and undergo a ton of medical procedures, being monitored at all times by scientists and other careful individuals. But once again, that doesn't mean it's the perfect solution, as it is still full of risks and can lead to the death of not only the one giving birth, but the child and others around them. Food is also a major concern to anyone who wants to go outside of the migrant fleet. Due to once again their delicate immune system and also having the opposite digestive system to humans and Asari, Quarians are unable to eat anything from other species other than their own refined edible paste that is issued to them when they go out on what is known as their pilgrimage away from the fleet. That said, they do share the same digestive system as Turians, so are able to eat their cuisine if they really wanted to try something different that won't completely poison them. But generally, as funny as this sounds, the Quarians have a full-on vegan diet, as the Quarians found that for them, eating livestock does not give them the perfect resource to calorie ratio when stored on the migrant fleet. Plants and vegan produce, however, does. Due to all of these limitations to their bodies, the most intimate thing a Quarian can ever do is link their suit environments, and if one were to do this, you know they are fully trusting and care for the other individual, because doing this guarantees that the Quarian will get sick. But doing so does mean that they will adapt to it over time, as long as they aren't affected too much on that initial exposure. As a final point, despite sounding like Quarians are some of the weakest individuals out there, looking like extremely skinny humans who have to be protected from environments at all times, they are actually extremely strong and have a high pain tolerance. This is documented by the clone-made Krogan known as Grunt, whose whole genetic makeup states that Quarians are not soft or easy to kill, unlike others such as Solarians or Turians, thanks to their robust physiology. This is also shown thanks to one Quarian known as Kilojar Vas Idina, who, despite having their environmental suit compromised and taken on board several horrible alien diseases going into a fever, they would go on to survive for much longer than anyone would expect, even going through interrogation processes before finally dying to their sickness, really going to show that even though their immune system is their downfall, they have incredible strength to keep going. Maybe that's character dependent, but going by what the Krogan think of them, they clearly are an incredibly robust species, and maybe this is due to how hard they have had it for many centuries. Whilst they painted a picture of the Quarians being a hard done by species, they are actually a thriving group now living on their migrant fleet. Maybe it was due to necessity, but the fleet itself is said to be a real sight if you are able to stumble upon it. And inside it is no different if you're lucky enough to step inside, which is actually not very likely considering their whole immune system and everything else. Inside this fleet, the Quarians have one goal, and it's a simple one. That is the survival and sustainability of the fleet itself, and because of that, every law is designed so the citizens follow that goal. One child is the absolute limit for all married Quarians on board the ship, and if they are to have more, they will be arrested, as it goes against their zero population growth law, simply to make sure there are enough resources to keep them going. That said, if the population were to shrink due to illnesses or a big attack or something like that, they would be allowed to have more than one child, but as of right now, that has not really happened at all. Due to these ambitions of the fleet, the whole Quarian species is a completely close-knit society where they always look out for each other and will watch each other's backs at all times. Loyalty, trust, and cooperation are highly prized qualities, and this is something they have had since they first came to be, something that the Protheans speak about, believing it was due to their eco-symbiotic society in their homeworld. With how close they are with each other, Quarians do a lot of storytelling amongst one another, usually telling stories about what is going on outside of the fleet, mainly as a form of escapism from life on board a ship at all times. For the young Quarians growing up, they will be encouraged to undertake what is known as the pilgrimage outside of the fleet, and only then will they have passed into adulthood. The main reason for this pilgrimage is to allow the young to understand what is going on out there in the wider galaxy, to experience other cultures, other species, and to also realize how much they appreciate their own kind when they eventually return home and can then tell their countless stories of who they met at and what they experienced. This is a big step for a young one to go out on a pilgrimage, and because of it, it's seen as a big event within their society, as they all gather to send them off and give the one going away gifts to aid them on their scary journey outside. But the pilgrimage isn't over until the Quarian who has gone out on it returns back home, having found something of value to bring back. This can be in the form of information, money, or supplies. Once they do get back after a successful pilgrimage, they will then be given the luxury of joining whatever ship they like instead of their birth ship, allowing for genetic diversity and preventing intermarriage between close relatives. Joining their new ship, this important resource they gathered on their pilgrimage will be presented to their new captain to prove to them that they will not be a burden to their crew. That's not to say the gift will work, as it can be rejected if it is deemed as a pointless or inadequate gift. But this is seen as extremely rare, as most captains on the fleet are just happy to see a new member on their ship. The most crewmates on a ship, the more prestigious it is seen to everyone, as it basically means the captain has financial and material means to provide for a large group of people. But having a big crew would come at a cost, as living conditions on Quarian ships are extremely cramped most of the time, with many families sharing the same small living spaces right next to other families also in very small living spaces. But for the Quarians, this is their home, as they personalize them however they like, making them also as soundproof as possible to make it peaceful and cozy enough for them to sleep. On top of that, the Quarians have individual ships for different parts of their society. These ships also contain their own unique clans that differ from one another in their own unique ways. The best way to see this is thanks to their environmental suits, which the Quarians always wear in case of a hull breach on their ships, as well as all of the other reasons mentioned earlier. The Quarians have personalized their suits to make them have symbolic and cultural significance to each other, but to all outsiders as well. Even when they get their first suit when they are young, this is seen as a rite of passage, showing how important these suits really are. Usually, a Quarian will customize their suit when they get back from a successful pilgrimage to prove that they are now an adult and also show who they are closely linked to. The suits are so important within their society now that they even have a lullaby about it named My Suit and Me, which is dedicated to the protection provided by the suits themselves and is heard quite often on board a Quarian ship. As well as symbolic gestures and imagery when it comes to suits, the Quarians are religious as well. Maybe not to the same level as Asari or humans, but they do believe in something. Here they practice a form of ancestor worship, which usually involves taking a personality imprint from the individual and developing it into an interface similar to a VI. Over the many centuries, these imprints have become more and more sophisticated, allowing them to really preserve their ancestors and have an overall imprint that could be truly intelligent. The Geth sadly destroyed the data banks of these imprints back when they rebelled, which led to a real crisis amongst their people, and because of the destruction of these imprints, they would believe their exile is a form of punishment for their hubris. Not all agreed, however, as many still just believed that the Geth rebellion was a mistake and not a punishment for their supposed sins. Respect for their ancestors still lives on to this day in their society, as they frequently open public events and speeches by giving thanks to their ancestors who saved them from the Geth and founded the migrant fleet, allowing them to continue living on. Other phrases such as Kila Saleh are seen as religious in meaning, as they translate to "by the homeworld I hope to see one day," going to again show what the Quarians really look up to and live their life by. But for now, as the fleet continue on their never-ending journey, it could be argued that the most important thing they do on their travels is protect their most vital resource out there, that being the live ships themselves, which are the life and soul of the migrant fleet. These live ships contain everything the Quarians need to survive on their journey and most likely house farms and food processing plants. Unfortunately, as these are the most protected ships within the fleet, no species other than the Quarians are allowed to enter them, so little has been documented about what is really within them. All that is known is that Quarians living within the fleet do regular volunteer shifts aboard these 3 live ships in the fleet, and if anyone were to break in or sabotage them, not only would it mean that millions would starve to death, but that individual who broke in would feel the full force of the Quarian law, having hundreds of Quarian military soldiers being sent in to seize them, as well as the full navy being sent in to defend it from any other attack. If the individual is captured, they will then feel the full force of capital punishment, with the worst result being execution, but most of the time exile is seen as the common punishment. That said, any offspring an exile has are welcomed back into the fleet, fleet, so really it's not that big of a punishment to the family anyway. In terms of their economy, the Quarians actually have a completely different system compared to those within the Citadel and the rest of the galaxy who use credits for everything. In fact, Quarians have no need for credits at all, as they value the little space they have above anything else. So essentially everything they have is all they ever need. Why would they want to have anything more? If a Quarian has an item that they do not need anymore, they would go on to place it into a public area similar to that of a market. They are then put into a storage locker, and those who really need things go on to just take it for themselves. Once again, following that societal value of looking after one another. As for food, this is controlled massively by the leaders of the fleet, so there is no real the rich get more food and medicine than the poor, as all of them are equally rationed and get what they need and no more. Essentially, they have to live under constant rations. The only time money is exchanged or goods are traded between individuals is when a Quarian comes back from their pilgrimage and offers them to their captain. Resources are vital for their journey, so during these negotiations, anything is seen as beneficial to them, even if it is credits to buy more ship parts or whatever they might need to help them out and their society. But by this point in time, the year was now 2186, and the Quarian society was thriving in their own little way. However, the bitterness towards the Geth was still there, even if the rebellion had been over 300 years ago or thereabouts. Because of this, one branch of the migrant fleet military known as the Special Projects were going to develop a series of effective countermeasures to hit back against the Geth once again and finally give them that strategic edge in terms of military strength. Here they would finally do something they had been wanting to do for a long time and launch a full frontal assault to retake Rannoch from the Geth, and here the Admiralty Board voted to arm all of the ships in their civilian fleet to help them in their attack. As the attack started, the Quarians launched precision strikes on 4 Geth systems to drive them back to Cocoon, the Quarian home system. This attack was a success for them, and alongside it, they would also go on to attack a Dyson sphere that the Geth had been building for centuries, a project that was said to unite all Geth into a single optimized network to maximize their processing power. With the sphere, the Geth's pride and joy destroyed, they would become extremely rattled and wanted to hit back against the Quarians so much that they accepted some big upgrades from the deadly creatures known as the Reapers to make sure they could continue on and avoid complete destruction. With the Reapers' code being integrated into the Geth populace, their processing power rose massively, allowing them to hit back against the Quarian countermeasures. This turned the war in the Geth's favor, and once again the Quarians were on the back foot as they had been trapped within their own Cocoon system, and multiple ships were taken out by anti-ship cannons located on Rannoch. Luckily for the Quarians, a member of the Alliance, a human Spectre known as Commander Shepard, would go on to launch a Quarian counterattack on a Geth dreadnought. Venturing into this dreadnought, utilizing their stealth drive, they would not only disable it, allowing it to be destroyed, but they were going to discover that the signal giving the Geth the upgrade code was located down on Rannoch itself. But it wasn't just a Reaper signal, it was an actual Reaper itself. Going against all of the odds, Shepard with the help of the Quarian fleet would go on to destroy the Reaper, the first one they'd ever taken out themselves, and with it cut off the Reaper signal emitting the upgrade code. With that destroyed, the Geth would be left on their own without their upgrade code, and their fate would have to take a new direction, with Shepard's actions allowing them to decide their next steps, and if successful in their negotiation due to the actions way before, would allow the Alliance fleet to have the Geth fighting against the Reapers, the machines they once believed were their old gods. If Shepard were to help the Quarians survive either by uniting the Geth and them together once again, or by just wiping out the Geth like so many of them wanted, the Quarians would go on to help all of the allied forces at the battle for Earth against the mass Reaper forces. With the battle being an overall success with Shepard sacrificing themselves for the rest of the galaxy, the Quarians would leave with their migrant fleet, most likely setting themselves back up on Rannoch to live on their homeworld once again, something many of them had only dreamed of doing. However, prior to the galaxy-wide war in 2186, a small group of Quarians would go on to look at setting up on a new homeworld and would set their eyes on the Andromeda galaxy, and because of it worked closely with the Andromeda Initiative to work out how best they could go and settle there. One Quarian known as Shurleth Vas Novara would go on to gather important information from the Colas array, and with that, they were able to determine prime colonization sites in the outskirts of the galaxy. When the 4 arcs including the flagship, the Nexus, set sail for Andromeda, carrying mostly humans, Asari, Turians, Solarians, and Krogan, the Quarian arc, Kila Seya, would go on to be delayed as a number of other races would go on to book passage aboard the vessel, which would be a nightmare for the crew as they would have to go on a technical mission to try and accommodate the various races' environments, which, as we have explored earlier, is an incredibly difficult thing to do with how vulnerable the Quarians are to environments. These Quarians were seen to many as being very odd. Why would they want to give up their homeworld of Rannoch and move to a system far away? To many it felt so unnatural and went against everything the Quarians stood for in their society, but for some reason, maybe these Quarians were exiles or criminals in their society, they had decided that there was a new home for them out there, and that was reflected in their ship's name, which translated to, by the homeworld I hope to find one day. Eventually the Kila Seya was able to launch in 2186 just as the Reapers started destroying the Batarian worlds, and would go on to finally carry around 4,000 Quarians with 16,000 other races on board such as the Volus. But like all who worried, this ship's journey was not to go to plan as an interspecies plague developed aboard it due to a computer worm masking its presence, which completely messed up the cryostasis process. With passengers being forcibly defrosted due to these malfunctions, the Quarians would become susceptible to illnesses, with some of their suits being damaged due to the long centuries of sleep, which only went on to spread the Fortibras plague further into the ship, with many on board not realizing it was already there. As the plague spread more and more, a cure would go on to be made against the pathogen, but by this point, the casualties on the ship, especially within the Quarian sections, were getting ridiculously high. But for those who were able to take the newly developed cure, they were able to sleep for the remaining 3 decades of projected travel time before finally arriving at Andromeda. Much later in this journey to Andromeda, one of the other arcs, known as the Hyperion, would go on to receive a repeated transmission from the Quarians Kila Seya, warning people to stay away. But despite receiving it, the actual location of the signal's origin and the arc itself is completely unknown, and the crew of the Hyperion is unable to determine where it is at this stage of their journey. Although going by how bad the plague had gotten on the ship and how vulnerable the Quarians are to any environmental illness, it is most likely that the entire ship is a deadly plague-infested one, where no one can survive it, with the ones who are sleeping forever stuck there, because if they were to come out of their slumber, they would be infected and most likely die. To this date, it is unknown what has become of the Quarian society, but considering not much has changed since they first set out into the stars up until the 2186s, it's most likely they are still the same as before, working together as a species to further develop themselves, and maybe if they finally teamed up with the Geth, getting over their differences, they can not only have a great existence on their homeworld of Rannoch, integrating well with the environment once again, but they can also integrate well with the Geth and work on furthering their society on a technological level, helping them to create giant leaps forward. Maybe we will see what their society has been up to within the Milky Way galaxy soon, but for now, this has been the story behind the nomadic species from Mass Effect. This has been an in-depth look into the species known as the Quarians. I want to say a big thank you for watching this video, and a huge thank you to my patrons who allow me to make these on a regular basis, including my small fishes, my big fishes Greg and new guy Nox Vox, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Video Gamer 75 and Sith Lord 906, my sharks Alfred Correa and Jason X117, and my Megalodons Bad Clams 83, Hazy Thoughts and Sinus. If you also want to support this channel, the links are down below, including my merch, which is some pretty sweet stuff I've got to say, and also check out the audio version over on Spotify and other podcast suppliers. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching again. Please do like, comment and subscribe to help them get out there. And finally, with all of that said, I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.